and the changes have uh, gradually adopted new provisions. When stand design method was adopted, first the allowable stand design method was a chapter which said that it is an alternate procedure. Then that chapter was pushed to an appendix, still allowed, so that it takes about 3-4 editions of the code, so that in that time the users can adjust to the changes. So in that tradition, appendix B and C still allow earlier provisions which were used in pre-2011 code editions. Loading again is a very interesting issue because over the years there has been a change in the United States whereby ASCE has been accorded exclusive authority to handle the loading code, which is ASCE 7. The uh, addition ASCE 710 is commensurate with ACI 318 2011. Otherwise, there are later editions of ASCE 7. Um, ACI officially makes a reference to General Building Code IBC 2009 and to ASCE 7, ASCE SCI S7-10. So by that reference, those loading provisions are part of ACI 380. Otherwise, there are no loading provisions in any document of American Concrete Institute. You have to look for those loading provisions in an appropriate code, which now and till such time that things change would be 7 ASCE 7. Now, chapter 9 is the strength and serviceability chapter. It provides you what load combinations to use, which again are in harmony with ASCE 7-10 and the controlling IBC. The load combinations for allowable strength design method as well as for strength design method are part of those codes. Strength reduction factors, which are capacity reduction factors, are also part of this section, this chapter, which is chapter 9. Deflection control provisions are also part of this chapter. There are two kinds of deflection control provisions. One that tell you that this, if you follow the following depth, span to depth ratio for normal loads, the thicknesses adopted would be adequate. And other provisions which you say that if you wish to compute the deflection, these are the broad guidelines about what order of deflection would be acceptable. So these are, for those who are already in the profession, from ASCE 710, the stand design method loading provisions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, dead, live, and roof live. This is first important load combination. Then a load combination involving wind or as appropriate replaced by earthquake. And whenever you apply a wind, you have to reverse the direction. 1.2 dead plus 1 earthquake plus 0.25, snow. And then you have to reduce your dead loads in order to make sure that if there is any compensating effect, by the dead or gravity loads that is eliminated and curvature reversal is possible. These are the capacity reduction factors. Point 9, as it has always been for the tension controlled sections. Very initially, this was for beams, but later on, the test or the cutoff line for determination of phi was not whether it's a beam or a column, but what was the level of strain on the extreme tension side. So the current or the 2011 version of ACI 318 makes the cutoff line for adopting an appropriate value of phi as strain. We will come to that later. For compression controlled sections where the failure is initiated by concrete reaching a strain of 0.003 before steel reaches a strain which is accepted by code as a cutoff line, which is close to yield strain, higher than yield strain, in fact, uh, become the compression control section in terms of the code. That is 0.75 for spiral reinforcement, and for other reinforcement members, there is a greater reduction that becomes 0.65. The code penalizes for the ties. For shear and torsion, the phi is 0.75. Bearing on concrete, it is 0.65. For post-tension anchorage zones, is 0.85. Now, this is um, the provision of the code, which says that the yield side strain should be 0.005, and at this provision we will say that the section is now tension controlled. When the yield side strain is 0.002, the code would declare this section as a compression controlled section. This is where the compression controlled phi would be applicable. This is where the tension controlled phi would be applicable. So C over D over T ratio in this case would be 0.375, and C over, this is C, strain, this is the um, uh, uh, depth above the neutral axis, depth of neutral axis. C over DT ratio in this case for compression controlled section would be 0.6. So between these two extremes, the code says that you should interpolate. So this is a diagram that I've drawn for you, which says that you maintain phi of 0.65, and this reaches a value of 0.9 because this is now a tension controlled section. In between, you interpolate. This interpolation is for ties, tied columns. And this is for spiral columns, column with spirals as lateral reinforcement. You start with a phi of 0.75 till you reach a strain of 0.002, and then you go to 0.9 because you now qualify as a member which is tension controlled. Uh, as I was initially saying that there are two types of provisions for deflection control. Minimum thickness for solid one-way slabs is L by 20, simply supported, one end continuous 24, both ends continuous L by 28, and for cantilevers L by 20, beams L by 16, L by 18.5, L by 21, L by 8 for cantilevers. But you must understand, especially those who are at the start of their careers, that these provisions cannot be applied blindly, because you would note that the deflection in any member is a function not only of the span but also of the um, moment of inertia, of which only H is one part, B is another part, modulus of elasticity is another part, which in concrete will be dependent on an under root of f sub c prime. And load is a very significant part. There is no uh, mention of loading that has been applied on a member, and the court has simply said that span by 20, apparently whatever the load. But hidden behind this span over 20, span over 24 is the assumption that the loading would be normal loading, usual loading. So these provisions are applicable to usual cases. Whenever you note a case where you think that the loading is unusual or something else is unusual, be very careful, compute the input reflection yourself and see if it is a reasonable value. Now there is a time dependent effect of deflections, and code has given you a chart whereby you multiply your deformations which are immediate um, um, with a factor in order to determine long-term deformations, and they may reach in 5 years uh, a value which is almost double the value that was at the start. So you should be very careful when you compute your deflections that you are computing only immediate deflections. While under sustained load, only that part of the load, which is the dead load, there'll be an increase, continue to be an increase in the deformations, which is due to creep. This is a second check on your deformations. If you do not want to use the H span over depth ratios, you can compute your own deformation and see if your deformations are within acceptable limits for roofs not supporting or attached to non-structural elements susceptible to damage. And you can read it yourself and see that these are applicable to, you know, what happens when a roof or floor deflects, it damages whatever is attached to it. So the provisions relate to the fact whether something is attached to it which can be damaged or nothing is attached to it which can be damaged. So you should read this in this context, and you should note that the course says that these provisions do not cater for ponding, which means that if your roof deflects to a degree where storm water starts accumulating on your roof, these provisions may or may not be adequate. You should run a separate check to ensure that ponding or accumulation of storm water doesn't take place at the roof. Now, um, the uh, depth uh, to span ratios for slabs which have direction in both directions, the so-called two-way slabs um, can also be, the depth can also be determined. And these are slabs without edge beams. These are slabs with edge beams, without edge beams, with edge beams. These are exterior panels. These are exterior panels, interior panels, interior panels. But this group is without drop panels. But this group is with drop panels. Drop panels is a block, a thickened block of slab around the columns. So when you have drop panels, you can reduce the thickness of the slab. You need to have L over 33 without drop panels. The same provision becomes L over 36 when you have drop panels. The lower bound for without drop panel slabs is 5 inches. The lower bound for with drop panel slabs is 4 inches. So for 60,000, it becomes 30. For 75,000, it becomes 28. For 40,000, it is 36. For 60,000, it is 33. For 75,000, it is 31. You should not blindly read these provisions. Try to understand what is happening. As you increase your strength, the code is penalizing you, asking you to provide greater depth, because as the stress is increased, strain is increased. When strain is increased, greater cracking occurs. when greater cracking occurs, there is a greater degradation of stiffness, which means a greater loss of moment of inertia. As it is a composite member, the tension side of the member suffers cracking, and you need to have a larger, a thicker section in order to control your deflections. Uh, this is the slab with interior beams. Um, this is a formula which you can see 36 plus 5 into long side over sharp side divided by alpha FM. This depends upon the stiffness of the um, beam to slab minus zero point 0.2. But when this is taken as 1, this is 9 plus 9 into beta. And if beta is 1, this becomes 36 plus 9, that is 45. So in order to simplify the things, this is a beam with substantial thickness. This is a beam uh, with more than substantial stiffness. So alpha M is considered to be more than 2, which means if it is a wall, it's almost like that. The code stops giving you further advantage beyond an alpha M, which is stiffness of the beam to the slab. Which, when it exceeds 2, the code says now your thickness should not be reduced beyond this. That is Ln, which is the longer span, into 0.8 plus again, this is a penalization or an advantage for higher strength. If it is 60,000, this figure becomes 1.1. If this is 40,000, this remains 1. So longer span into 12 becomes inches divided by, for beta of 1, that is long to short is 1. This is long side into 12, that is in inches, divided by 45. If it is grade 60, multiplied by 1.1. Otherwise, you can compute your alpha M and plug in your value here and get the value of the deflection. Now, chapter 10 and 11, which would need a slightly more time because they are the chapters which you will be using very often. Time कितना रह गया? ओके, मुझे इस तरह करके मैं डिस्ट्रैक्ट हो जाता हूँ. मुझे टाइम बताओ. एक तो मैं लगता है मैं गलत बोल रहा हूँ. Chapter 10 is the chapter for axial forces and for flexure, which means that this counts out shear only. So this is a fairly tricky chapter, and probably a chapter which you are using for a considerable percentage of your practice time. The basic assumptions for flexure have been laid down within the code itself, that the beams, when they are called beams, except for deep beams, conform to Euler-Bernoulli's hypothesis, the way this beam is behaving, which means plane sections remain plane. While it becomes a deep beam, code says that now you will be required to use other provisions, and normal provisions would not apply because the plane sections do not remain plane when the beam becomes deep. I'll come to what a deep beam means, but suffice it to say at this time doesn't mean that beam with large depth. Strain compatibility and equilibrium, which means that the strain in concrete is equal to the strain in surrounding steel. Maximum compressive strain of concrete is 0.003. Whatever the failure strain, whatever the actual failure strain of your concrete, code cuts it off to a value of 0.003. And tensile stress capacity of concrete is generally neglected. A concrete steps block may be rectangular, trapezoidal, parabolic. Code doesn't stop you from using those. And reinforcing steel stress would be based on an ideal elastic, perfectly plastic stress strain diagram. This means that the diagram moves like this in a straight line and then in a horizontal line, which means there is a um, um, Hookean behavior in this direction and then in the horizontal direction. The strain follows stress. The stress follows strain by related to the strain through E, and then the stress becomes constant at Fy. This is the requirement. This is the assumption when you are using this code. Uh, this again is a reminder of um, that epsilon s is less than 0.002. This is a compression controlled section. When epsilon s is between 0.002 and 0.005, this is a transition section. When an epsilon s, that is tensile side strain, is large enough to be greater than 0.005, this is a tension controlled section. That is how you would design it then. Um, this is the general mechanics of a section according to the procedure that is hidden behind the code. Not that the code provides these equations, but when you follow what is the philosophy of the code, you will note that the A sub S would be yielding. Area of steel will be yielding because the code is requiring you to adopt a strain which is 0.005. So it means that it is more than your yield strain. So when the tensile strain on the tension side is greater than the yield strain, because the code requires you to ensure that it is greater than epsilon y, the tensile force will be area of steel multiplied by F sub y, because it is an ideally elastic, perfectly plastic section. You have reached a strain which is higher than F sub y, so multiplied with F sub y. And for a Whitney's block, 0.85 F sub P prime is the average stress. A is the depth of the compression block. C is equal to 0.85 into B into A. This becomes the force. And the couple, that is tensions provided by steel. Steel concrete couple would be D minus A by 2 times either T or C, which means that the moment resisted by this system would be this tensile force or this compressive force, which are equal, times d minus a by 2. This is what the code implies. So when you plug in C is equal to T and you say that 0.85 F sub C prime into B into A is equal to AS into Fy, and A is equal to, again, manipulating this equation in terms of AS, phi mn becomes this, and plug in the value of A here and you end up with a quadratic equation. I'm not going into detail because that will be consuming a lot of time, just pointing it out that it ends up in a quadratic equation, which you can look up in any textbook in reinforced concrete. You solve this quadratic equation and you get the area of steel required. Now, ACI says that whenever P sub u is less than a zero point 0.1 F sub C prime area gross, epsilon T should be greater than or equal to 0.004. This is a requirement to control ductility. The previous requirement that we were looking at was to control what phi should be used. Now the code is ensuring that the section that you have designed, when it is loaded and the load is gradually increased till such time that the failure occurs, the failure will be initiated from the tension side. Previous ACI code, maybe 3000, before 2002, said that you compute a balanced steel, the steel at which the concrete reaches a strain of 0.003 and steel at the same time reaches a yield strain. There will be a certain amount of steel at that point. Don't use a reinforcement which is more than 75% of that value. If you need further capacity, do not rely on steel concrete couple. Use instead a steel couple. If you add steel at the bottom, use steel at the top, so they form yet another couple, and when you add those two couples, you get um, the required capacity. But capacity through steel concrete couple is limited by this provision. These two provisions have very similar results. Pre 2002 codes ended up with 0.00376 at the cutoff line. Now it is 0.004. So as I said, the code doesn't make very drastic changes in its provisions, and the changes are very gradual. This is how you control your ductility in accordance with what I've already said. This strain becomes 0.004 and this becomes 0.003. This can be computed A sub Sy, and this 0.85 into F sub C prime into B into A maximum. And when you plug in the values, this is the value of X maximum. And just by simple plugging in and manipulation of the equations, the maximum moment that you can get with a tension, a steel concrete couple is 0.228 into F sub C prime into B into D square. This was a very complicated procedure in the previous codes when the code required you to restrict your area of steel, uh, um, which relied on steel concrete couple to 0.75 row balance. Now you can remember this figure. 0.228 into F sub C prime into B into D square is the maximum moment that you can get with a beam that is relying on steel concrete couple, which is normally called by some people as a singly reinforced beam. If you wish to increase the capacity further, provide steel at the tension side and steel at the compression side. So this is a pictorial view of the moment that you can get as you increase your D, the maximum moment that you can get with a tension steel concrete couple. This is visible here with various 3000 psi, 4000 psi, 5000 psi concrete, and 60,000 psi steel. So the value increases with your increased D, but there is a limitation at which you can't go beyond it. If you fix D here, you can't go beyond it. If you want to increase your capacity beyond it, provide steel on both sides. Code requires you additionally to, this is not a very common problem in reinforced concrete. It's a very common problem in steel, that the compression flange may become too thin inadvertently. Lateral torsional buckling may occur in reinforced concrete members too, and the code restricts that the breadth of flange uh, times 50, this is the distance. At least at this distance, you should have a lateral support. Say, the beam is 12 inches wide, 1 foot wide. So 1 into 50 is 50 feet. So every 50 feet at least, you should have a lateral restraint, which means that at that lateral restraint, no lateral movement should be possible, which means that your uh, beam cannot be too small in width on the compression side unless it is laterally supported and in intervals. This does not mean that a 1 foot wide beam at the top can have a span only of 50 feet. Even if you have a span of 50 feet with a 1 foot of wide beam and there is no restraint at the end, this provision, the requirements of this provision will not be fulfilled. You have to restrain.
Rizwan, we have a question.
Yeah.
The question is from Mr. Adnan Dar.
Yes.
He's asking, normally designer prefers beam to beam designed as under reinforced, but
Yes.
is it risky to design doubly reinforced beam? Your opinion, please.
Okay, Adnan, my opinion is that all the code wishes to ensure is that the failure of the beam when it takes place would be ductile, which means that when the failure does take place, now you must understand something. Whenever failure of a beam or a column takes place, the compression side reinforcement, the compression side fiber of the member, be it column, be it beam, uh, would be concrete, and it will be having a strain of 0.003. Uh, it has to reach that strain in order for the member to undergo a collapse. If a beam is overloaded, even if the steel starts yielding, unless that 0.003 is reached on the compression side, collapse would not occur. The deformation will continue to increase. Uh, the code says that just make sure that before that when your concrete side reaches a compressive strain of 0.003, make sure that the steel has yielded. It is well within the yield area, well within the yield area, not just at the um, cutoff point where yielding starts, so that we can ensure that yielding has already started when the concrete finally gives way and reaches a strain of 0.003. So the failure has to be initiated by steel, giving you enough warning, giving you, ability to cater for it, and in earthquake resistant structures, which have their own requirements, but ductility, this, what I'm saying is, ductility is required there also, although for different reasons. In a nutshell, if I were to give a one-liner answer to you, is that an under-reinforced beam would not tell you the phrase an under-reinforced beam. The phrase probably is not very happily worded. It will be a ductile beam, a beam with the ability to ensure that the yielding of steel has already started when the concrete reaches a strain of 0.003. Hope it answers your question. If you have any other question or need further clarification, just tell Mr. Tahir. Minimum reinforcement for tensile control members traditionally has been 200 over Fy into Bw into D. This is not related to age, mind you. And additionally, it is 3 into F sub C prime under root into BWD. So you have to follow these two provisions and say which provides you with more reinforcement. When your flange is in tension, use equation, the first equation only, that is 10.3. BW may be uh, either breadth of web times 2 or breadth of flange, whichever is smaller. Code is giving you an opportunity to reduce the reinforcement when you have, for a beam under gravity, the top of the beam would be in tension at the supports. So instead of using the full width of the flange, which becomes the part which is in tension, you can use either breadth of flange, which is actually in tension, or twice the width of the web, whichever gives you an advantage. You can use a smaller area if you wish. Uh, there is another provision in the code which I would be reluctant to use. It gives you a very small amount of reinforcement. It says that if you do not wish to follow this, just provide an amount of reinforcement which is 1/3 more than what you require. but do it then at every section. It means computed reinforcement times 1.3 at every location in the beam would replace these two provisions if you wish. But I would want you to guard against it, because when you think that the reinforcement computed in this way becomes extremely small, ridiculously small, there is something very wrong somewhere. You have to look for it. This should generally not govern. Now, with tension control members, the provisions applicable to slabs, the mats or spread foundations um, is 0.002 for grade 40 or 50 and 0.0018 for grade 60. And for others, there is a correction factor, but none of these, especially this one, these are specified, should be less than 0.0014. So again, the code is giving you an advantage when you are using a higher strength steel. So the provisions of 200 over Fy do not apply to slabs. They apply only to beams. So when the section um, is behaving like a beam, it has great depth, it has one direction in which the moments are being transmitted, and narrow width, large depth, it looks like a beam, so it is a beam. The code says that don't spread your reinforcement too far apart. You should restrict it to a certain spacing, because reinforcement being too far apart, even if it is adequate in its total quantity, will result in cracking. So this is the equation. X maximum 15 into 40,000 over F sub S minus 2.5 into the distance, clear distance that is there from the extreme tension reinforcement to the extreme tension fiber. Cover distance from the surface of reinforcement steel to the tension face. So this is the cover, but not to the center, but from the face of the bar to the extreme tension fiber of concrete. So this you can either compute or consider it to be 2/3 of F sub y. F sub S, that is the working stage stress. This is the working stage stress, not the stand design method stress. This stress that you see appearing in the denominator is the stress in steel, which is at the serviceability stage, which may be either computed from first principle for each case or assumed to be 2/3 of F sub y. A code allows you to use that.
Rizwan, we have a question.
Yeah.
The first question is from Mr. Dar again. He's asking minimum reinforcement for slab is for one face or both face?
Okay, the answer to this is for one face. This is the provision of this is only part of the truth. His question is very intelligent. If I have a slab which is 5 feet thick, you can't get away with providing reinforcement at the bottom and then forgetting about the rest of the 5 feet. That is liable to cracking then. But code does not require you to provide reinforcement at each phase, but it is common sense, and other textbooks would advise you to guard against cracking when the depths are large. So reinforcement would be provided not only on both faces, but in each direction, maybe also in the third direction, in order to control cracking.
So have you finished, Rizwan? There is another question.
Yes, I have.
So now the question is from Mr. Muhammad Imran. He has written section 9.5.2.3 of the code gives a moment of inertia expression that
Yes.
is to be used for deflection calculations.
Yes.
Why this equation provides effective moment of inertia
Yes.
rather than cracking moment of inertia?
Okay. Okay. Imran, we must appreciate that there are three things that we are talking about. We are talking about gross moment of inertia, which is the moment of inertia assuming that there is no cracking, and assuming that there is no steel. We are assuming that we have a member that comprises concrete only. So if it is a rectangle, say it becomes BD cube over 12. That's it. Then we are talking about crack moment of inertia. We are talking about a moment of inertia where the section has cracked, and you can see these calculations in any textbook of concrete where you locate the position of the neutral axis, where the first uh, moment of the area about that axis of the area on the compression side, concrete area, is taken and equated to the area of steel times the distance from the steel centroid to that axis squared is equated. Then you compute that area, and then on the basis of that, the moment of inertia of steel is zero, while the transformed moment of inertia is taken, transferred moment of inertia is taken, and that of concrete transferred to the centroid is taken, while the area of steel is corrected for the modular ratio. So you can look it up in any textbook. That is the cracked moment of inertia. So we have talked about two things: concrete in a cracked position, uh, concrete in a totally uncracked position, a cracked position, and with no reinforcement. And then we are now talking about effective moment of inertia. Effective moment of inertia is an entity or a quantity or a concept which is the moment of inertia actually available to you if you know what your gross moment of inertia is and your crack moment of inertia is. This is the one which will be based for computation of your deflections.
Yeah, there are no further questions. You
Okay.
can.
All right.
No. He has asked another question. Just hold
Yep.
on. We have Mr. Ruman, Muhammad
Yes.
Ruman, if I am pronouncing it correctly. He has asked in ETABS 2018 ACI code not present at all. Is ACE 7-16 alternate code of ACI? I have not been able to understand this question. If you are, please go ahead.
Okay. I do not fully know, I'm not fully aware of the facts, but I know of the principle. ACI 318 has not been discontinued. He says that certain ASCE has been referred to. ASCE is the code used for loading only. Any code that may be referred to whereby the ACI relevant version of ACI, okay, whereby the relevant version of ACI 318 is invoked would be IBC. In a nutshell, if a software says which code you want to use, if it says choose which IBC, then it automatically includes a certain ASCE 7 and a certain version of American Concrete Institute 318. But referring only to ASCE, certain version of ASCE, does not mean directly or indirectly that you can design buildings without making reference to ACI 318. Let me clarify it further. IBC, UBC, these codes have
Hello,
traditionally
Walaikum Assalam.
the provisions of reinforced
Sir,
concrete design within their main
नहीं
body.
आज तुसी अटेंड नहीं की थी
They have been using, reproducing the
Hello?
ACI provisions within their own body with
क्या हो रही
provisions.
हाली चल रही है
So there are only one set of provisions in the United States for
चल रही है
reinforcement.
सर चल रही है
You can't design a building or a structure without referring to the provision of ACI 318. If you are looking
अच्छा
for them
अच्छा
elsewhere,
तो
there will be the
10 मिनट रह गए ने मैं उन्हें कहना कर देने
okay. So for beams, the code requires you to place your reinforcement at the top in a separate fashion and not in a concentrated manner within the flank. That's what I mean.
आधा घंटा 40 मिनट
Okay. This is the preferred fashion in which the tensile reinforcement at the top is to be located. And the edges need to have tension reinforcement for half the depth of the member. If this is the tension side, this is the reinforcement. If this is the tension side, this is the additional reinforcement, which is called skin reinforcement. This is applied to beams more than 36 inches in depth. So initially, when I started my practice, this used to be 10% of the main tension reinforcement. Now the code refers you back to the spacing limits of the reinforcement for slabs. Remember, we talked about certain spacing limits for slabs. These limits, distribution reinforcement, should not be placed further apart than these limits. So for this, code also refers you to the same spacing limits, those applicable to slabs. This is a deep beam. This is not a beam with depth greater than 36 inches. This is a beam where a concentrated load, heavy concentrated load has been placed within a distance of 2h from the support, or where the span is less than or equal to 4 times h. These beams tend to have a strut in this fashion and a tie in this fashion. Again, here you see a tie and a strut and a strut, and this results in this type of cracking. They must not be, their presence must not be overlooked whenever they appear. The flexural design and the shear design of these beam types merit special attention. Otherwise, you will end up in a great amount of cracking and even capacity loss, because the plane sections do not remain plane in these beams. So for compression control regions, there is no longer any provision for minimum eccentricity. There used to be a provision in 1971. I've been using this provision myself when I was young. That was 0.6 plus 0.03 into h. H is the depth of the member. We're talking about a column, lateral dimension of the member in inches. Say if it is 18 inches member, 18 into 0.03 plus 0.6, this is an answer in inches. So your PU times these inches will become your minimum moment in kip inch. So don't use a moment less than this. But this provision has been eliminated. I'll tell you how, except for moment magnification. Why it has been eliminated, I'll come to that also. Phi mn for a spiral is 0.85 times phi times this 0.85 is replaced by 0.8. The provision is the same. So it is phi times 0.85 into f sub c prime into area of gross into area minus area of steel. So basically stress in concrete times area of concrete. Just count out the area of steel because you are separately multiplying f sub y with area of steel. So don't count it twice. Otherwise, it's a simple equation. Concrete area times 0.85 fc prime, steel area times f sub y. Simple. times phi. Phi, use appropriate phi when it is spiral, and use appropriate phi for when it is tie. This is not phi. This is a capping factor. This is a factor at which the code has uh, placed a limit of 0.85 for spiral and 0.8 for column bit ties. This is the okay. I'll not make you run before you can walk. Maybe I'm going too fast, but this is a typical behavior of a column. A column or a beam, they are both governed by this diagram, which is called axial load moment interaction diagram. If you make your axial force 0, this is a beam. So it is perfectly all right if you read the capacity of the beam from here. So if you make this moment 0, this becomes a pure column. But other than this, these are beam columns, all having certain axial force and certain bending moment. But these various points on this diagram, which is commonly called interaction diagram and formally called axial load moment interaction diagram, represent the limiting capacity when you use a certain size, certain concrete and steel strength.
Rizwan, can you stop here? We have an immediate question.
Yeah.
It's again from Muhammad Imran. He's
Yes.
asking, can we use 16 millimeter or greater than 16 millimeter bar diameter in the slab?
Sorry, would you repeat that again?
He's asking, can we use 16 millimeter or greater than 16 millimeter bar diameter in the slab?
Yes, nothing prevents you from doing it, but 20 millimeter would be number 6. 16 millimeter would be number 5. Number 5 and number 6 may often be seen if he's talking about floor slabs. But in very heavy slabs, even higher numbers may be used. There is nothing that prevents you. The broad rule, Imran, would be not to use a very large diameter of bar when you can use a smaller diameter of bar and keep the spacing smaller. That will be to a great advantage. Say, why not dia 25? Of course, why not dia 25? Number 8, number 9, number 11, number 14 can also be used. There is no restriction placed by code. But when you compute your crack width, when you have only provided an area of steel by pushing the bars far apart, instead of using a choice of using a smaller diameter bar and placing the bars closer to each other, you are creating a greater problem of cracking. A simple answer to you, there is no code restriction, except that my request to you would be to check your crack width. Okay, this is interaction diagram. This is the eccentricity which is infinite, 0 axial force. This is where the eccentricity is 0, 0 moment. And this is the balanced position where the steel yields and the concrete reaches 0.003 point. The points below this, any pair of moment and axial force in this region, here, would be tension controlled region, which would mean that the failure would be initiated by steel, but ultimately, of course, steel has to fail by strain of 0.003. I repeat that. In this region, the failure would be through failure of concrete by reaching a strain of 0.003, while steel has not yet reached a failure strain which is equal to the yield strain. So you would not know. and failure would have occurred. So this is a very undesirable failure, but this has to occur in columns which are heavily loaded. Lower story column.
Rizwan, we have another question.
Yep.
It's again Mr. Dar.
Yes.
He's asking, is it feasible to provide large spacing in spiral ties? What is limiting spiral pitch requirement?
There is a volumetric requirement. You can look it up in the chapter which relates to reinforcing steel. I look it up in the code and read it to you. There is a volumetric requirement. You can always compute the pitch by that. निकालना ये chapter. I'll look it up for you. Otherwise, the requirement for spiral is in terms of distance for ties, reinforcement. Chapter 7.
Distribution of flexure reinforcement. Distribution of flexure reinforcement. Chapter 9.
This is not good. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I will have to stop my lecture here. Meanwhile, I'll on the other computer, I'll look up the requirement and read it to you at the end. Failure of these columns is through compression, and these columns are failing through tension, and these are ductile, these are not ductile, and you can't do a thing about it. In this region, when you increase your axial force, you reduce your moment capacity. Where is it? Where? कहाँ है? हिंदी रखो. टाइम नहीं पढ़ने. Facing which? If you want to read this diagram, go to your axial force, come horizontally, and this is the maximum moment that you can provide. If you increase the axial force, go horizontally, you can provide a reduced moment. This happens for all locations above the balance point in the compression control region. But for tension control region, you have an axial force, go horizontally, come down, this is the moment you can provide. Increase your axial force, go horizontally, come down, you can provide even greater moment. This is the codal, this is the behavior of this interaction diagram. The code penalizes you, the diagram penalizes you for increasing the axial force if you are in compression control region. It gives you a benefit of increased load if you are in the tension control region. So when you are at the top of a multi-story building, and if your column has a certain amount of reinforcement, and when you go up, your axial force suddenly drops, the reinforcement requirement is suddenly changed, which means that maybe one story adds 100 kips. At the top, you have 100 kips. Next story, you'll be having 200 kips. Third story, you'll be having 300 kips. So at 100 kips, you will have a certain requirement of reinforcement. At 200 kips, you will be having another requirement of reinforcement. And as you go up, you may end up with an increased amount of reinforcement in a multi-story building. So don't be worried when you suddenly see a reinforcement requirement that is that have been increased when you go up. Otherwise, generally, we are all used to the reinforcement requirement getting decreased as you go up. This is it. So you should be aware of this behavior. This is the family of the diagram. The code allows you to use a reinforcement percentage varying from 1% to 8%. And this is the end of the diagram. May I advise you, or may I share with you my feeling that nobody can provide a reinforcement in this range, range close to 8%. 4 or 5% is practically the limit that you can achieve. Otherwise, there is too much congestion unless you have special type of joints. With lap splices, you can't have this type of,
We have two more questions.
Yep.
One is from Yasir Mahmood. He's asking, sir, fundamentally, which code gives more economical design, Eurocode or ACI?
I can't answer this question. I do not know. The answer, the results must be comparable, but I must be honest enough to admit that I do not use Eurocode.
Second question is from Mr. Imran, again, Muhammad Imran. He's asking, can we bundle bars larger than number 36 in beams or girders?
Larger than?
Number 36.
Number 36. Where is he getting these dimensions from? There is no number 36. Number 18 is the largest size.
That I was also surprised, but I thought maybe.
In general, I can answer this question in general. You bundle bars where you can't use a large number of bars. And if you place them at normal spacing, they become too close. So instead of keeping them too close, you put them just fitting them side by side. And then you are penalized for anchorage. When it comes to anchorage, you have to provide a longer anchorage length, which means longer splice length, longer development length. These would be the penalty. I can't answer this question because I've never seen a bar of this size which he's narrating. ASTM A615 doesn't cover this. Maybe I missed it. Maybe. नहीं है.
Commentary में है बताती हूँ.
नहीं है. Yeah. Okay. मुझे अब उसका जवाब देने में सवाल है. KL/R. This is the next requirement when you come to compression members. The elastic instability question. Columns from
Sorry for interruption again. There is another important question. I think you should answer it at this stage. Please, I'll just read it out.
Yeah.
This is from Yasir Mahmood. He's asking, when we provide reinforcement of 4%, aren't we compromising reinforcement percentage? That is making it 4 plus 4 is equal to 8% in places of laps.
I don't understand. When you are providing 4% reinforcement, we are in fact providing 8%.
No, he's saying when we provide reinforcement of 4%, he's asking now, aren't we compromising reinforcement percentage? That is making it 4 plus 4 is equal to 8% in places of laps. Now,
yes.
how?
Yes, he's right. When you are using lap splices, you will have congestion. No. That is not counting towards. Now I understand this question. Are we violating the code? No. The answer, if the question is that can't we use, if we are using a reinforcement of 8%, in fact, we are using a reinforcement of 16% at the places where we are supplying 100% of the reinforcement. If we are using a reinforcement percentage of 4%, we are in fact using a reinforcement percentage of 8% at the places of supplies when we are using lab supplies. If this is the question, the answer is no. The utilizable capacity of 8% of reinforcement is the limit. Physical presence of 8% reinforcement is not naturally the result of a supplies. If you are using 1% reinforcement, look it up in the interaction diagram. You can't look it up for 2% because you have spliced it. It is for 1%. But in general, you shouldn't splice all of your reinforcement at one location. That becomes a mess. And you should generally not keep your splices side by side. That again becomes a mess. You should move the splice bar toward the inner core of the concrete member so that the lateral spacing is not compromised. Okay, KL over R, the length effect, which is a great disadvantage of all compression members. You can't use their full compressive strength because before utilizing their full compressive strength, premature inelastic stability problem occurs. ACI code says that you can neglect it for members not braced against side sway at KL over R of 22, and you can neglect it at 34 minus 12 into M1 over M2, but it should not be greater than 40. This is maybe a little bit confusing, but I will try to make it less confusing as I move forward. There are stories which do not undergo significant lateral displacement. There are stories which are braced against side sway. There are stories which undergo significant lateral movement. These are stories which are not braced against side sway. There is a test of the code which is provided within the code, and if I have the time, I'll show you the arrangement.
Rizwan, Imran has clarified again, which I have seen, the code is in my hand. I could not find it, but maybe you can answer it. He is asking, dear management, ACI section 7.6.6.3 uses term number 36, number 43, as well as number 57.
Okay.
So the code which I have, it does not mention it. Maybe it's an old code of ACI.
Imran, maybe there is a confusion. Is your code 318M or 318? पता मुझे आप चले मुझे उस सवाल का जवाब दें.
The code which I have, it says
no, the code which Imran has, is it 318 or 318M?
He has not written this.
Ask him this. I think he has 318M.
Yes.
Right, Imran?
He has 318M, yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This is the basis of confusion. 318M is the metric version of ACI 318. So when he is referring to a certain diameter, that is number 11 bar. You can bundle number 11 bar. Why not? Okay. Let's move forward.
Here, now, Dar, in the meantime, Dar Sahab has asked the question again. He has said why we are not being able to adopt coupler instead of lap slicing in construction practice in Pakistan till now.
What we have not been able to apply?
Coupler, we have not been able to adopt.
I've seen couplers being used in Faisal Mosque once, but I don't know. Maybe they cost you more. I've not investigated, but I think they must be costing more. There is inertia. Maybe they don't cost you because the splice length of large bars is considerable. We are wasting a lot of steel in splices. in addition to causing, congestion. Your question is very valid, Adnan. I can't answer it, but it must be investigated. They are very efficient. There are two types. I don't know if you're talking about mechanical coupler. I've not seen it, but I've seen metallurgical connection being made, which in fact connects in a butt joint. It melts both ends and metallurgically connects. Your question is very intelligent. We should be using it. Somebody should look at it. Maybe PSCE should be looking at it. So K for ideal conditions is 1 when you have one sine curve within one pin and pin. The L physical length becomes the elastic effective length. So the K is 1. When we have a cantilever free and fixed at the end, the elastic curve is completed, the sine curve is completed at 2L. If this is 1L, this becomes 2L. So the 2L becomes the effective length. When you have fixity at one end, pin at one end, it is at 0.7 of the length that sine curve is completed. So the K becomes 0.7. When you have fixity at one end, it is at 0.5 L that the sine curve is completed. So the K becomes 0.5. But these are theoretical conditions. Real life structures are not like this. You don't have perfect fixities, you don't have perfect pins. So ACI and AISC provide you Jensen's nomograms, whereby you find the level of fixity on one side, level of fixity on one side, and then you connect the two and read your K. These are sway frames which start with a K of 1 and go to the K of infinity. And these are non-sway frame with start with a K of 0.5, which is perfect fixity, and go up to 1, which is perfect pin. So this psi is the ratio of stiffness, all the stiffnesses at a joint, all sum of the stiffnesses of all the columns at one joint divided by sum of the stiffnesses of all the beams on that joint. This ratio is psi. EI over L of all the columns on this side. If there is a column coming from up, a column coming from below, there are two columns in one plane, of course. And there are two beams. This is a sum of two. Higher the stiffness of the column, greater would be psi. Greater would be the psi and higher would be K. You need a relatively flexible column for a beam of a given dimension to fully restrain it. Once it is restrained, the K will be reduced. So as the story is non-sway, if the sigma Pu into delta naught over Vus over Lc is less than 0.05. Pu is sum of the factored axial loads of all the columns on that story. Delta naught is the first order relative deflection between top and bottom of the story under a load which is equal to Vu, which is under the lateral load that is story being subjected to. Maybe it is an earthquake load, wind load, divided by Vu, total lateral load on that story. Lc is the center to center height of the story. So it's very easy to compute. When you run a frame analysis, you know delta, you know Pu, sum of the axial forces on all the columns, divided by total shear in the story divided by height of the story. If it is less than or equal to 0.05, very good, you have a non-sway story. When you have a non-sway story, you have the advantage of being a K being restricted to 1 at the top and 0.5 at the bottom. So you have very good conditions, and your limit is also increased at which you can neglect the elastic stability. This advantage is also available to you. Now, after we have computed this K, what do we do? we have a KL over R which exceeds the value beyond which below which we are permitted to neglect the length effects. What do we do? The code says that ACI method is that you, in order to handle your length effects, compute KL over R. If KL over R is higher than the limit at which you can neglect it, now you must consider it. How do you consider it? You should increase your moment by a factor delta and then design normally. Use your normal P as you were using, and you compute your M sub C, which is M2 times delta. M2 is the larger of the two moments, one at the top, one at the right, factored moment. Increase it by delta, maybe by 20%, 30%, whatever. You multiply it with that, use PU, go to that interaction diagram, and normally design your column. Delta is the multiplier, which is C sub M over 1 minus P sub U over 0.75, 75% of P critical, which is the Euler's buckling load, pi square EI over KL over R square. This is Euler's buckling load. This is your actual load. 1 minus this is times C sub M. C sub M has been defined at 0.6 plus 0.4 over smaller moment divided by M2, larger moment. Positive for single curvature bending and negative when your bending is in double curvature. So when you plug these values, you get a value of delta. Delta will give you the multiplier for the moment. EI in this Euler, this P critical is not normal E, not normal I. E is 0.2 E concrete into I gross divided by 1 plus beta DNS, which is the ratio of maximum factored axial sustained load, which is dead load, to total load, factored load in the same load combination. So
Question.
up in the, it's not a undergrad class. Okay.
8 मिनट रह गए
वॉल्यूम दिया हुआ
8 मिनट रह गए टाइम
We have 3 questions.
Yes, मुझे नहीं समझ आएगा
टाइम 8 मिनट रह गए
Rizwan, are you with me? We have 3 questions.
Yeah. Yes, I'm listening.
The first one is from Mohammed Imran. He's
Yes.
asking, can we use shear reinforcement consisting of structural steel, eye or channel shaped sections in slab?
Yes, they are called shear heads. They are used at the column location. They are permitted to be used. As
Okay.
shear heads.
Okay. The second question is from Yasser Mahmood. He's asking for water tanks, earthquake design in E-tabs, how we apply the convective and impulsive effective of water.
Imran, who is asking this?
Yasser.
Yasser, I'm not a user of E-tabs, but I can, all I can tell you is that many people have addressed this issue of the water filled tanks subjected to seismic forces. Husner, for one, has solved this problem and given simplified equations. I'm not sure which the model of which is based on a mass over a mass connected by a spring. But I cannot address a question directly related to a particular software because honestly, I don't use E-tabs. I'm not familiar much with E-tabs. I know about E-tabs, but very little.
The questions should be related to the lecture and to the technical issues regarding software. Maybe one is using a software, the other is not using. So I think those questions should not be asked here. You can ask any other question, technical question related to the lecture. Now, Mohammad Imran is asking again, how we calculate the effective length factor K for tapered columns.
Question to me.
जी, sorry. कहाँ है?
How we calculate the effective length factor K for tapered columns?
That must be done by first principle. You can use a handbook, or if you are using digital computer, use an approximation by discretizing your continuum into smaller number of pieces and then computing K. Otherwise, this is an issue where the code would not answer you. Your next question may be related to a haunched beam. How do we compute the deflection of a haunched beam? A beam with smaller thickness at the middle and greater thickness at the ends. These are not issues related to codes. These are issues related to handbooks or fundamental textbooks in mechanics.
We have a last question from Mr. Dar. He's asking a building has its gray structure completed and building was under finishing when concrete cores were extracted. Its results were very less than required compressive strength. Is it strength evaluation based on ACI 318 or ACE 741? Now, Dasa, what is the question? I didn't understand. Could you, Rizwan?
Should I?
How they investigated? ACI 318 is a design code. For investigation, there is a separate ACI code. That is very detailed. It also addresses the issue of the number of specimens to be taken and the issue of interpreting the results. In terms of
562, ACI 562.
Sir, please, no crosstalk at the moment. Kindly text whatever you want to say.
For the last moments, Dar, I've found out the ACI provision in chapter 10, the volumetric control equation is 10-5, as I had remembered. There's a volumetric control on the amount of reinforcement for spirals, and the pitch issue is 7.10.4.3. You can read it and the answer is there.
Okay, next question is from Yasir Mahmood again.
Yes.
Is the impulsive and convective effect considered while designing overhead water tanks, or it's only for on-ground tanks?
No. I can't address it in terms of a particular software. In general, this issue relates to all tanks, whether they are on the ground or they are overhead.
Okay. Rizwan, how long more you need to complete your lecture?
I don't know. A considerable part has been lost today because we started late. If somebody has a question, then as we had promised, we will be answering the questions because we are bound to.
You have 15 minutes more. You can, if you want to wrap up your lecture, you can wrap it up within 15 minutes. Then we can have another 20 minutes of question answer session.
All right.
In between, I will entertain any question now. You please finish your lecture within 15 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Let's move now to chapter 11, which is the next chapter after 10, uh, which relates to particular elements. We have already seen compression and flexural members, and now we are moving to shear in any member. For beams, the codal provisions are that it says that you should the loading should be less than or equal to the capacity, and the capacity is the capacity of concrete plus the capacity of steel. Capacity of concrete is 2 F sub C prime into BW into T. Now this 2 F sub C prime under root is the key. The allowable stress in concrete under ACI for beam shear is 2 into F sub C prime under root. For 3000 psi, this becomes something like 110 psi. But when you make it 4000 psi, the strength is of course not 4 by 3 because it's an under root relationship. So it doesn't move as fast as you would normally accept through a linear relationship. B sub W is the breadth of web, D is the depth. So if you have a T beam, it's the breadth of web, not of the flange. That has no role in shear. V sub S is the difference. If you have a V sub U, subtract from it the value that can be resisted by concrete, and the remaining must be resisted by steel. So when you compute this, you can compute the spacing by moving it here and bring it here. A sub B is the area of shear ties, stirrups, which is if there are two number 3 bars, the area becomes 2 into 0.11, that is 0.22. If F sub YT, this is F sub Y for shear, say it is 60,000, this becomes 60 if this is in kips. It becomes 60,000 if this is in pounds. Into D into in inches. This is consistent in units. So this becomes the spacing. This moved here. So A sub B into F sub Y into D divided by V sub S becomes the spacing. Spacing should not be greater than D by 2. Spacing should not be greater than 24 inches. This is these are the sections that regulate it. So too far apart spacing would not be beneficial because cracking in a diagonal manner is at 45 degrees. And when you have bars, arrangement of bars, which is farther apart than a D, there'll be a crack in between. But in order to make sure that there at least one bar intercepts a crack, code has said that D by 2 is the limit. Certain codes I've seen restrict the spacing to 3 by 4D. So, but ACI says that whenever you are providing reinforcement, even if it is at minimum, as a minimum, it should be no further apart than D by 2. The V sub S, when it is 4 times F sub C prime BWD, which means twice the value of the concrete strength. 2 F sub C prime BWD is provided by concrete. Say 30 kips. Twice that value becomes 4 times 60 kips. When this is more than 60 kips, this spacing is halved. D by 2 becomes D by 4. Minimum spacing to 24 becomes 12. So you have a cutoff line at V sub S when it exceeds 4 F sub C prime BWD. And at 5 F sub C prime BWD or VS maximum 8, which means 8 plus 2, 10. Because this is resisted by concrete, this is resisted by steel, the total becomes 10 F sub C prime under root. This is the total shear, which is 5 times the concrete strength. When the total shear exceeds 5 times the concrete strength, you can't design that section. Revise it. Either increase your concrete strength or you increase your member sizes. Graphically, this is what it says. For VC by 2, this is the region. This is a shear force diagram. The shear force can be at a distance D for a beam from the face. If this is direction is upwards, that is compression. If the load is from the top, not from the bottom, and if there is no concentrated load in between. If these conditions are met, you can use a value of Vu, which is at a distance D from the face, and use this value for the design. For Vu less than V sub C by 2, no reinforcement is required. For Vu greater than V sub C by 2, but less than V sub C, you provide minimum reinforcement. For V sub U greater than V sub C, but less than such value that your value doesn't exceed the maximum permitted value, that is 5 V sub C. That is the 5 times the concrete strength, that is 10 F sub C prime BW8, or Vs becoming 8 times F sub C prime BW8. This is the region. In this region, you provide computed reinforcement. In this region, you provide computed reinforcement. The only difference is that this is following the standard minimum maximum spacing. This is following half the maximum prescribed spacing. So maximum spacing is D by 2, this becomes D by 4 here. If it is 18 inches, 24 inches there, this becomes 12 inches here. But if it exceeds 5 times the concrete strength, you can't do it. You revise your section. The entire section has to be revised, or concrete strength has to be increased. For slabs and footings, for beam shear, the critical section is D from the face. You just treat it like a beam. For two-way shear, or punching shear as it is sometimes called, the critical section is D by 2. So this is the section that is undergoing failure. D by 2 this, D by 2 this, and this is the section that is undergoing. So B naught is this plus this plus this plus this. Area under shear is this B naught times D depth. That 3 equations govern the allowable strength. 1, instead of 2 F sub C prime under root, this becomes 4 F sub C prime under root. The next check is the shape of the column. If it is like a column, it remains 4. If it is like a wall, it doesn't remain 4. It is reduced. So beta, long to short ratio, is added to 2. If it is beta is 1, it is 4. 4, it becomes 6, but this is the upper limit. If this is 2, this becomes 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. This becomes 4. This means this cannot exceed 4. It will be penalizing an aspect ratio of a column where the length of a longer side of the lateral dimension exceed twice the shorter side of the lateral dimension. Then it will fall below 4. Then you will have to use less than 4 as your concrete strength. 4 F sub C prime under root is the highest you can have. This will penalize you, correct it for the ratio between the longer lateral dimension and shorter lateral dimension. Up to 2, there is no penalty. Beyond 2, there is a penalty. And this is a correction for D over B naught ratio. When D over B naught is changed, code again penalizes you. I'll show you through a diagram here. Yeah, this diagram. These are the 3 equations. This is B naught. B naught is B naught over D. D over B naught is this. This D over B naught. This is here. As it is changed, gradually, as it improves, the depth improves, you gradually move to 4 for 3 conditions. Alpha S, it is 40 for interior columns, 30 for edge columns, 20 for corner columns. For these, you gradually improve your position as your D or B naught is improved. when the d over b naught value is low, till such time that it becomes 0, you get only 2 f sub c prime under root. Then that becomes your allowable stress. So amongst these three equations, you will be using the one that gives you the lowest value. Thereafter, you multiply your perimeter times depth, and with the allowable stress chosen from amongst these three equations, the one giving you the lowest value will be the one that is chosen. That will be the capacity. So I'm sure that you are tired by now. I'm not, but I don't want to text you too much. I had wanted to talk about shear supplies length also, but some about chapter 21 also. But let us defer it to another session. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Does anybody have any questions? Am I audible to you? Have we lost contact?
Okay, Rizwan, are you finished now?
Yeah, I'm saying that if nobody has any question, and I think they'll be tired by now.
There are questions. There are questions. Just give me some time. The first one is now from Yasser Mahmood.
Yes.
He's asking for slabs spanning around 60 to 70 feet clear span. What is the feasible solution other than going for post tension slab?
One-way slab.
He has not mentioned one-way slab. He has just asked for post tension.
All right. One-way slab. If it is two-way slab, the feasible solution could be a waffle slab. If it is one-way slab, the feasible solution could be a one-way joist. One-way joist would be where you have beams in the direction of the span, and beams would be closely spaced, and rather a relatively thin slab over those beams. This will be the ideal solution if you do not want to use pre-stressed concrete. Otherwise, you can go for a folded plate. But for a folded plate, the disadvantage would be that you cannot use the top of the folded plate as a floor. That can be used as a roof, but that cannot be used as a floor. So if you want to keep your top surface plain, the only choice you have is to have a one-way joist.
Okay. Next is from Muhammad Imran. How can we use fiber reinforcement as shear reinforcement, and how fibers are primarily used for their ability to provide post cracking tension resistance to the concrete?
Well, Imran, I'm very wary of these fibers thing. Well, it's a commercial thing. I'm not saying anything against any business. But with weak concretes, the one of which, the type of which you might be using the applications where you might be undertaking a repair, is not likely to be very good concrete. So I just wish to give you a word of warning that this has no use at all where the concrete is very weak. CFRP, a concrete fiber reinforced plastic or fiber reinforcement, if that is what you are talking about, is a very high strength material, but that quickly slips from over a surface that is not very strong. So even if you ask a company, a European company, to provide it or provide you guidance for using their product either as a strip, as you use it for flexure, or by way of a wrap, like fabric, as you normally use it for shear, they would not advise you to use it unless you can demonstrate that your concrete strength is adequate. That is,
ask him pehle. Acha ji, next question is waffle slab good enough for heavy loading?
yes, why not? All you need to do is to check it for punching. The locations thickness between the projected parts should be checked against punching if they are concentrated loads. If they are UDLs, there should be no worry. It's a matter, it's a relative question. In principle, can't say that these are for light loadings. No, you can't say.
Yeah, this question was from Yasser, and the next question is from Muhammad Imran. He is saying the maximum shear force at the support, hence it will give maximum stress at the support. But why code permits design for a maximum factored shear force at a distance d from the support, means less stress as compared to support?
Yes. Imran, this is an advantage, which is not an unqualified advantage. This is an advantage that is given to you when the reaction is compressive in nature. When your end is hung from the top, that is, your reaction is tensile in nature. This advantage is no more. So the only advantage that you are getting is through the compressive diagonal that is formed at the support when your reaction is for a gravity load upwards, or generically speaking, it is compressive in nature. So it is presence of that compressive stress that gives you an advantage. Otherwise, for instance, when you hang the end of a beam with a hanger, you go to the center and check your shear. There's no exemption.
Now we have a question from Mr. Dar, Adnan Dar. He's asking, no, it is not a question. It is just a request. Kindly request Mr. Rizwan to complete the remaining chapter of ACI 318 in any upcoming lecture.
Okay, this is up to the office to find a suitable slot. I'll be more than happy to complete. It's a very lengthy topic. We can go over it for months. It will become a full-fledged. It may be converted into a full-blown course in reinforced concrete. Yeah, the brief answer is yes. I'll be glad to do it. Office can find a suitable slot. I'll be glad to.
I think next year's schedule of lectures would be are still under preparation. So, inshallah, next lecture you can plan according to the request made by Mr. Dar.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we have a question from Mr. Roman or Mr. Roman. I'm sorry if I correctly. It is. Sir, as a bent bar is more economical for shear, then why vertical stirrups prefer? He's asking basically if since the bent bar is more economical for here, then why do you prefer vertical stirrups?
Yes, because they are easy to place. Otherwise, he is right. If we were to follow the tension stress trajectory, will need less reinforcement. This reinforcement that you provide is corrected for incorrect trajectory. If we could, orient somehow through some magic wand, orient our rebars for shear, following exactly the trajectory, the amount of reinforcement required for shear would be reduced. But that will be too much impractical. You can't do it practically. So that is why it is not done. Otherwise, his question is very intelligent. If it could be done, it should have been done.
We don't have any further questions in the chat box. Yes, we don't have any further questions, but if anybody want to ask the question on microphone, he is most welcome. He should raise his hand and then I will give him the chance to speak. किधर आ जाता है? किधर आ जाता है?
जिनको Zoom नहीं देखना वो वैसे चाहे बात करा करके बैठा हो।
नहीं When I say that they should raise their hand, it means that you have to raise your hand by using the command. Then only I will know if anybody has a question. So today we are already in the extended time now. So if there are no more questions, then I can end the session, question answer session here. And Muhammad Imran has said, magnificent lecture for PEC platform. Thank you so much, dear sir, for given. And thank you, dear management, to provide best platform. Well, this is the objective of PSCE, to arrange good speaker, knowledgeable speakers for you, and who can impart and spread knowledge related to the basic engineering and to the advanced engineering. It's a combination. So inshallah ta'ala, we will continue to strive hard to give service for the young and experienced engineers. And gentlemen, today it was the last lecture of this year 2020. As you know, we have completed now today, it was the 25th lecture. So we started in 2019 and we should have, the tally should have been today 24, but it is 25. We have given one extra lecture and inshallah, next year's list is under preparation. And because of which I can't make the announcement for the next lecture today. The list has been prepared. Next week, it will go to Pakistan Engineering Council's office in Islamabad. It has to be approved. Then once they give us their feedback on the lectures, then I will announce. So I contemplate that it will be announced somewhere in the first week of January. The announcement will be made and the lecture will take place in mid of January, the Saturday, same time. But the topic and the speaker will be announced later in the first week of January, as soon as we get the approval from Pakistan Engineering Council. Again, I received a message. I think somebody got a little bit irritated with my hard attitude on the video camera. I'm really sorry if I had used a little bit hard language. This is something I have to apply as per the regulations of PEC. You know, if I lose my license, if PSC loses the license for giving online lectures, then who is the sufferer? You people are the sufferer. So I have been requesting again and again, please follow the rules. That is, same for everyone. The rule is a rule, and it is meant to be followed. So this is what I wanted to say, and in the first week you will get it. And Rizwan, thank you very much for such a impressive, a knowledgeable lecture. I think you worked very hard to prepare this lecture, and it touched the basics and it touched some advanced things also. And that is, and I'm pretty sure that the audience, all the participants on Facebook and here must have got the benefit out of it, as you really strived very hard to explain the basics and some advanced theories of related to civil engineering, structural engineering. Really nice. And from the depth of my heart, I really thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now Yasser has made a comment. Since the lecture was so good, I really don't want to disappoint anyone. Rizwan, there is something, let me read it. If you have to answer it, please do it. I have seen this practice in Singapore and Malaysia, and it is really impressive the results they get from engineers. I hope it is taken under consideration. What is this? Admit. Acha, there is a question on the top. I'm sorry. Furqan Hamid said best topic selection and best speakers on PEC platform. Thank you. Very kind of you, Furqan. Then Yasser said, sir, I do have a suggestion. If PSCE could arrange some crash courses of 2 to 3 days for some specific designs like earthquake or masonry design, etc., for young professional engineers, that would be great. It is, I mean, we have noted your proposal. We started with the workshops before COVID, you know, and then COVID, since, you know, the workshops normally require live audience with flesh and blood, you know, everybody should be present. Yeah, maybe we can arrange it on online. I will discuss with my colleagues. If it is possible, we will arrange the crash courses. No issues. Your suggestion is noted. Then Furqan, you have asked, can we have one lecture for bearing capacity? Already we have given a lecture on bearing capacity. It was given by engineer Suhail Kibriya, I think 3 or 4 months back. Yes. And it was a basic lecture on bearing capacity. And you can check it on the Facebook. It is recorded and it is available on Facebook. Please go to Facebook, check the list of our lecture. Facebook, that is Pakistan Society of Engineers page on Facebook. You can go there and check the list of lectures. It is there. So then after this, he said, I have seen this practice in Singapore and Malaysia, and it is really impressive the results they get from engineers. I hope this it is taken under consideration. Okay, we will. So this is how it is. I am again pasting it on the chat box. How you can receive your certificates. All details are given on the chat. You can read it now. I pasted it twice during this lecture. You can again, for your memory, fresh memory, you can read it and you will get the CPD certificates according to the announcement I have written on the chat box. Rizwan, thank you very much. You will receive your certificate and you will receive your shield in your office by post. Miss Sadia Mukhtar, she will arrange it. And thank you very much for attending the lecture. And Rizwan, again, thank you very much for giving such a nice lecture. And one announcement I have to make, which is mandatory for me to make. This instruction is basically from the health department. It has gone to PEC, and I have been asked to make this announcement. This is regarding COVID. Please take care of yourselves. Wash your hands as required. Put your masks when you go out and maintain the social distance. Please stay safe. This is for your health and for your safety. And thank you very much to be with us. It was a pleasure having all of you here. So thank you very much and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.